Welcome everyone to Coffee with an Architect, who finally is here. So,
Yeah. I got my coffee.
Yeah, hope you all have your coffee. And I'm going to turn this over, of course, to Lee, our Allied Director, and he will get our program started.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you, everybody. It's always fun. You never know what to expect. And 2020 certainly has been an interesting year. And I guess this morning just kind of sums it all up, as you just never know really what to expect. And so, Brett, I really officially thank you for providing the best opening of all the Coffee with the Architects since we started this program. So thank you. But I do want to first and foremost thank our sponsor. And I don't know if anyone from Bombard Electric is on. Do we have anybody? Yes, no, maybe so?
I don't see them, Lee.
Okay, well, we do want to acknowledge them, say thank you very much for supporting this event. They also supported last month's event. For the Allied members that are on here, remember, it's a great opportunity to just really show support not only for the AIA, but we'll also provide you a platform to share a little bit more about your company with everybody else that's on the Zoom call. So thank you. And of course, you get the exposure through the AIA website. Today, it's a pleasure. You know, we've had a couple different types of platforms when it comes to this Coffee with an Architect. We started off, obviously, with Lance on kind of setting the stage, and then we had a few where there was just a single architect. We've had a panel discussion, and this is going to be our second panel discussion. So I'm pretty excited to have Brett from Cunningham Architecture here, and one of our fellow Allied members, Vic from NB5, as they get ready to partake or give, I should say, some of their expertise on where we're at, what to expect in the future, and where we're going. So I'm not going to take up too much more time because it's really about them. But Vic and Brett, if you guys want to take away with just maybe introducing yourself, and we can open it up from dialogue from there.
Brett, you want to go?
You go. Go ahead. You start.
So I'm Vic Sibilla with NV5. I'm actually a mechanical engineer, and the reason I thought this was interesting is that with COVID-19 and the challenges that we're facing, there are two components. You know, how we deal with the air and the space, the mechanical systems, the outside air, and how we deal with the configuration of the space itself. So it kind of lent itself to having both an architect and an engineer on the call, and that's kind of how this whole thing happened. And Brett and I go back many years. You know, I lived in Vegas in the early 90s, and I currently reside in California now, but I actually have an office in Vegas as well. So that's kind of how this whole thing came together.
Yep. Thank you, Vic. Yeah, Brett Ewing, I'm principal at Cunningham Group Architects, and I have been here, I hate to say it, almost 40 years now. So I've been telling people this year that I actually drew the volcano at the Mirage. So had a wonderful career, and I've been able to watch Las Vegas reinvent itself several times over the years, and now we're about ready to do it again. You know, as Vic said, with the implications of COVID. So we wanted to talk about some of the things that have happened during COVID and what we see in the future.
Great. So I have some questions, but this is really always designed for the Allied members. So I'm going to ask, does anybody have an opening question for either Vic or Brett? And gentlemen, thank you both for your opening. Okay. So here's the first question. You both have been involved in the gaming and resort hospitality industry for most of your careers. Let's focus on what has been going on in the market relative to the pandemic. What would be your thoughts on that?
You want me to go first, Vic? I'll start out. So what's been interesting for us in our projects is, again, as we all know, living here in Las Vegas, that our town's been severely impacted by it. As a destination resort market where people are flying in here, what we found is we have some Native American clients and some regional gaming clients that are in locations where people are driving in, and they've been able to reopen. We have a Tachayokit tribe south of Fresno. We're doing a project for them, and they haven't skipped a beat. They closed for 100 days, but when they reopened, they implemented a lot of spacing patterns and did some really good safety protocols. And interestingly, in California, as that state is really shut down, those places are the only place that customers can go to have some fun or entertainment. And The tribes are sovereign nations, I think, as most of you know, so they can override what the governor's direction is. And that particular tribe, the Tachi Palace Hotel and Casino, they're actually having record revenues. And the other fascinating thing to me about that is that they went completely non-smoking. They took all alcohol out of the casino. And still, which were two main things in Las Vegas that we always learned, you need those two ingredients, smoking, alcohol, and gambling. Those are just vices that people have. But people still came because they wanted to be together and have fun. And I thought that was kind of a fascinating thing. And we have one other tribe north of Seattle, Angel of the Winds, that they were the first to go totally non-smoking in the nation. And I think there's, I don't know, 90 or 100 properties now that have done that. And I think that's pretty fascinating, which then I'll let that roll into what Vic can talk about with mechanically and part of that.
Yeah, so, you know, when we look at the strip casinos, the strip resorts, they've always reinvented themselves, as Brett said, over time. And I think what we're traditionally seeing on the mechanical side, which relates to the architecture side, is we're looking at airflow measurement technology. There's a thing called safe DNA, and what we do is we actually release DNA molecules into the space, and we measure where the airflow is going, and we look at where pockets of problems may occur, where COVID may build up. And then we work with the facility or the architect, say, okay, if this is what's happening, how do we fix it? Do we fix the mechanical system? Do we change that? Do we change the configuration of the space? Do we put up partitions? Do we take partitions down? Do we open the space up? And that's the kind of stuff that we've been working with two of the larger gaming properties on the strip that I can't mention because we're under NDA. And what's interesting is that came from what Brett mentioned earlier, which is the Native American space, who are the first adopters of this measurement and verification system, which is how do we take your building and make it safe for reoccupying when it was closed. And so we would look at how we optimize the energy, how we optimize the airflow, and where the pockets of problems may occur, and how we fix it architecturally. So it's this blend of no longer is it a mechanical problem, is it a spatial problem, but it's a blend of how do they work together, because it's not one or the other. That's what we've been seeing.
Interesting. Follow-up question, Brett, for you. You talked about the fact that the vices, right? The no alcohol, the no smoking. For those casinos, was that basically just they're going to be their mantra for the term of the pandemic, or is that moving forward?
That was as you said, it was a mantra for the current situation, and we've just talked to Angel of the Winds recently, and they may never go back to allowing smoking again, which I think is great. In fact, we have a project with them to create an outdoor smoking patio, which to me is kind of a oxymoron. It's like a full circle. Now that we're going to create a nice outdoor space where people can go out to smoke and actually have some gaming outside. So I think it's, again, I just think it's fascinating that I think more properties will do this, and it may be permanent. And we see, I think the Monte Carlo, or I'm still calling it the Monte Carlo.
The park.
The park
yeah.
has gone non-smoking recently. So, which in our conversations over the years, it's like, oh, that's never going to happen in Nevada. But
so I've actually traveled to Vegas every other week, and I did for years prior to COVID, and I've only been twice since COVID started. I drove my car, and I stayed at the park because it was non-smoking. I wanted to see what it looked like. It was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. So this is obviously an AI-driven platform, and so from a design standpoint, that brings up an intriguing proposition for what's the future look like, right? Where people are going to say, hey, we're moving towards a non-alcohol or a non-smoking environment, how do we redesign these assets so that they can still accommodate those people that have those vices, but yet predominantly still keep it from a safer standpoint? And both of them certainly require, mechanical and filtration processes within them, and then starting from the design side. So I think that's interesting. Any questions from anybody else on the call?
So this is Adriana Gonoraski with Innova Technologies. Hi, Brett. Hi, Vic. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you all. How do you see hospitality in 2021? do you think it's going to pick up in the middle of the year, or do you think, I'm not talking about the casinos that you are talking about, I'm talking about the strip casinos or remodelings in there or rehabilitations, things like that?
We see that probably third quarter, and again, I think we're all hoping and seeing what happens with the vaccine, as these COVID infections have spiked. I think that's going to be the one thing that can turn it. However, there are those companies that are planning for the future, because this won't be around forever. And I've actually I've never liked the phrase the new normal. I like to think of it as, when are we going to get back to the old normal? Of course, there are things that are going to be permanent, I think, for the better. Systems, for example, that Vic talked about. But we think that probably third quarter, especially on the strip, other than some of the things Vic talked about mechanically. And again, the regional markets in hospitality are, again, rebounding quicker because it's entertainment, and people want to congregate, they want to be together. And we see that when you've heard the phrase pin-up demand, people want to get out and get back into our buildings. So we're learning a lot of things about design. And on the specific to hospitality though, Adriana, the conferences, as you know, really impact Las Vegas where we can't have conferences. And they're trying to open them up to larger groups now. I think the governor's still talking about that in January. And the way that's going to work, obviously, is with space. In this city, Las Vegas has a lot of space to work with. Big conference centers and several properties, including LVCA, which is, I think, to our benefit coming out of this. And just to add one more thing about hospitality, the hotel industry that we have a focus on, just purely hotels, is really suffering. And we're seeing some mixed use and readaptive use in some of those hotel properties and chains where they're looking at converting to housing more than rentals. So it's all in transition, but we see probably latter part of next year, 2021, that things start to come back.
Yeah, I would think that's probably accurate. I mean, like you said, the vaccine, it's hard to predict it, but I think the resort corridor is going to have to figure out a way to reinvent itself. When large gatherings come back, you'll probably see a very steep curve in how the resort corridor recovers, and a lot more deferred maintenance happening. I will say, from an engineer standpoint, I love working with architects, but it sure is nice that all of a sudden someone's asking about mechanical systems, because for so long you don't see what we do. And as long as it's cool in the summer and warm in the winter, nobody cares. And make sure you take money out of mechanical systems so we can have really cool finishes for the clients, which I get it.
Yeah.
But it sure is nice all of a sudden for people to go, hey, what about our mechanical systems? How do we fix that? So I'm enjoying it selfishly, and I'm sure that's going to go away in 18 months, when things get back to where they were. But while it's in the forefront of people's minds, it's certainly nice to be in that market sector. So I think there's going to be a bit of a challenge for a while, but I think Vegas will certainly reinvent itself, and that resort corridor is going to find a way to. It's pretty resilient, it's been around forever. It's not going anywhere. We just got to be ready for the onslaught of the new design that's going to be coming out of this whole thing. Be it more open spaces. I think you're going to see a lot less compartmentalization in the future, and that's from a place planning, and that's just my opinion.
And there was, sorry, Vic, were you done?
No, I don't know what you think about the openness and
oh no, I totally agree. The Tachi Palace tribe, they spread their machines out and did all that spacing, and they found that their customers, there used to be some rules of thumb that the banks of machines, there was psychology with how they were arranged, and people wanted to be in certain spaces, and they said that it actually improved. They kind of broke some rules. So they said, I don't know if they'll ever, they had space to spread their games out. They don't know that they would ever go back to the old banking methods. And so I think, yeah, the spatial thing, we also see finishes. A lot of the heavy fabrics you'd see, whether it's a wall covering or furniture pieces, that moving away from those, more cleanable, more, because people now, I think they go into a space and you look at it, if there's some porous materials and it doesn't look clean, at this point in time, people are going to turn around and walk out the door. So I think those are all really positive things for us and a new challenge in the industry.
Yeah,
I see Heather's on there. She'd probably relate to that.
We've actually seen some properties in Southern California and around the country take table games into the conference center and move the slots where the table games used to be, to Brett's point, to spread everything out. I thought that was actually a pretty genius way to do some some social distancing.
So I have a question. Follow up. Hey, Brett, are you seeing, obviously, if they're having to space out more, there's less gaming devices, and I would think less revenue. Are they looking to build more space so that they can make that up? Or is this sort of a short term where they're going to keep things spread out because they need to, but I would think that they're losing revenue as well with not as many devices being active and played.
Well, that's a great question, Lance, and it depends on the sophistication of the property, but many of those games are multiplay. And so, for example, that Tachi property has 2,000 games. They've been able to put 17 back into play. And it's not a problem because there's rarely, other than New Year's Eve or something like that, where all 2,000 devices would have somebody sitting at it. So I think they can manage that with the types of games. And again, they're multi-type games where you can change the type of game you play. So there may be some of that expansion. You're right. But I think at this point they've been able to manage that. Well, in that example, however, they took out 30,000 square feet of back of house space that wasn't really being utilized, so they just blew everything out on the edge of the casino, and that gave them the ability to do that.
Yeah, and we're seeing that as well, where if they use a convention space, they don't lose table games or machines. They just make the casino larger. Not everybody has that ability, but
yeah, until the conventions come back, obviously, then they'll have to rethink that.
then they're going to have to.
But, hey, Vic, this is Ken. Hey, Brett, how you doing? Good to see you.
You too, Ken.
Quick question, Vic, and this is for new properties, obviously. Do you foresee more on the floor type of mechanical systems going forward, or staying with the conventional type?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're already in pre-planning on some new facilities that are waiting to pull the trigger once they get the uncertainty of the economy goes away. They want to get their facility developed, and they've already asked us. 3 of them has asked us to do underfloor studies versus overhead systems for the exact reason: 100% outside air, high capacity filtration, HEPA filters for any recirculation we have, how we treat the air. All of that is what used to be a nice to have is becoming a need to have because of the liability of people getting sick in the building, mostly the employees. So again, what used to be a, hey, we'd like to have it if we can afford it because it's nice, is now a, we really think we need to have it from a liability standpoint. It's probably been, I don't know, exponential in the last 9 months of studies like that. So I think that's going to happen.
Hey, Vic, any change? We've talked a lot about what the casino floors and the conference room is doing. What has the impact been on the actual rooms themselves?
Vic, could you speak up just a little bit more? It's a little hard to hear you, but
I'm sorry. Is that?
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Just a little bit more.
Yeah. So, Brad, I'm going to I'll let you address the hotel because I don't think there's much architectural configuration change you can make in a room in an existing building. Maybe in a new construction, we could do something. In most hotel rooms, they have technology, and I'll just make one up: bipolar ionization, which is a big buzzword, but we can put systems in smaller fan coils in the room that actually treat the space, the air in the space. And that's one technology that's helpful, but it's not the answer, the end all be all. But again, what we're seeing from a lot of the end users are, what can we do to best help our condition as we know it today? Because you just can't solve the coronavirus from spreading into space. Yeah. And Brett, I don't know what we can do architecturally in a space.
Well,
besides.
we actually have a couple hotels in design right now that, again, they won't be built, finished, and open for maybe 18 months or 2 years from now. So owner's mind, and I think our mind, is we're looking beyond that. However, a lot of touchless technology is being implemented. I've stayed at some hotels where they drop off all your amenities, and then they don't come back into the room. So some of those things like that, but as far as pure design, other than some material changes that I mentioned earlier, we don't see a lot of necessary change in physical space itself.
Interesting. Any other questions? Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Vic. So maybe sticking on that subject for just a minute on the changes. Again, we've been talking predominantly about the hospitality industry, but eventually people are going to have to go back to work, or at least that's the desire, that people will actually go back to office buildings and back to work in 2021. What are some of the architectural design and building systems that are being adapted for a safer environment in 2021 and beyond based on what we know now?
Vic?
How do you move people, for example, safely through elevators?
So, it's a good question. When this whole thing started, it was social distance and everyone put up plastic partitions. And what we found, we did a study. We did both a CFD analysis and we did an actual measurement verification of a physical office. And we looked at partitions around the cubicles, which were spread out, or no partitions. And what we found was when you have partitions on 3 sides, you actually build up bacteria and coronavirus in the actual space. And when you don't have the partitions, it dissipates into a much lower level. So is kind of your intuition says if you put up partitions, it'll block the spread. But what you find is you actually get concentrations of it. And then you get super spreader locations in an office where one part of the office gets it and the other part doesn't. So we're finding that partitions actually don't help, but spreading people out further does help. Of course, wearing your mask and those kind of things. So when you get outside of the resort corridor and you get outside of, convention and gaming, and we look at offices and schools in particular, how do we treat those spaces mechanically and architecturally to make sure that we have a safer environment? And that's what we do through air handler assessments and then of course control systems and certain technology that we can deploy for the space. So we have to do that in conjunction with what does it look like on the inside? How does the air move through the space? And what do these classrooms and or office spaces now look like?
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think a lot of it is on those systems, Vic, spatially being spread out. Our office in Las Vegas, we're not back in it. I don't think we're going to go back in until March. Our company's made that directive. And because of the working from home has been successful for the most part. However, I think a lot of office space in the future and a lot of companies, and I'm sure many of you have been working from home, it'll be a mixture of people in the office and people at home. So the density will be smaller, which helps, with that spatial part of what Vic was talking about, spreading out. And again, all the different touchless technologies that can get implemented even from walking into a building and touching the hardware, to be able to avoid that with automatic opening elements, things like that.
So we're getting at the bottom of the hour. Actually, we are at the bottom of the hour. I'll ask for any final questions or comments from any of the Allied members first, or other than Brett or Vic. Any final questions, comments?
I'm just curious if Vic has found that the mustache goes ahead and filters better than being non-mustachioed.
This is my mask. I can wear it in public and I'm okay.
Seems legit.
Happy Halloween. Halloween's over, gentlemen.
I thought it was MacGyver.
Leave Tom Selleck alone. He's doing well. Hey, Brett and Vic, thank you very, very much for not only participating in this panel discussion, but providing us some really interesting thinking on, what is the hospitality going to look like? What is the buildings going to look like? How important is the mechanical systems to the viability of people feeling safe? And we appreciate your words of wisdom. I want to thank you on behalf of the Allied members, thank you from Coffee with an Architect, on behalf of AIA organization. And also want to welcome everyone back for next month when Daniel Chenin is going to be our special guest for Coffee with an Architect. With that, early happy Thanksgiving to all of you guys. Brett, you have another question?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I'm an AA member. I have been for years, and I wanted to thank the Allied group that's on today. Appreciate your support. You've been such a big part of the AIA. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Brent. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Brett.
Vic.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye.